Hey, John. Just in
Hey.
time for the dogs to bark. This is a
all
great way
good.
to start the show. It's time for another Eat Sleep Code, the official Telerik podcast. It's getting to be the end of 2021. Could you believe that's happening already, John?
Yeah, that's what time tends to do, go forward.
Yeah, it's like kind of predictable, eh?
Yeah, you would imagine that, I mean, people are like, can you believe where the summer is gone or where the winter is or blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, I can. I've been on this planet a long time. And we've gone around the sun a few times, and yes, this is what tends to happen. So
it does.
yeah.
We're going to be hitting a kind of a slow season for news here soon, and we'll get those wacky best of articles. I'm pretty sure we'll start seeing those pretty soon, like the wrap up to 2021 and predicting 2022 and all that fun stuff will be coming around the corner here shortly. Until then, we actually have some news this week. We'll start with some of your links here, John.
Sure.
So you've got
Can we start with AWS? Can we start with AWS first, though?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's hot off the presses,
this
right?
is like, this has happened. This is like the internet is melting. For those who don't know, AWS, specifically US East 1, which is like the Uber, like this runs everything basically. Well, this is what everyone uses basically, is currently experiencing technical difficulties. And so for folks who, are going through this right now, if they're watching this, my sympathies, my massive hug ops out to the AWS team. I really hope they can fix this problem. It's never a great thing when things like this happen, but this is the thing that people said, well, wait till US East 1 has an outage. Well, today's the day. And so yeah, there's no technical reasoning behind this yet. We're still waiting for a report, but it's just one of those things. Sadly, it also is an indictment of a lot of people who just rely upon one node in their cluster using cloud services. They rely on one node and that's it. This thing will never go down, and then it does. So sympathies to all those folks who are kind of firefighting everything right now. I really hope that Amazon can pull out a miracle and get this right sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so I pulled this up, I think not even a week, or was it last week or the week before? I pulled up Down Detector because Google services were offline. So it's
that was
kind of funny,
happened.
Funny but not funny. The big,
I know,
tech companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, are responsible for a majority of the cloud-based infrastructure that we have. Yeah. And their big promise was these things will never, not never, but you'll see like 99.9% uptime in within a month. We've had 2 major outages. Yeah. So that's not looking good. So this time it's Amazon's services are obviously affected. Like Ring is, if you're not aware, Ring is through Amazon. But you got Fortnite, Steam,
a lot of upset kids,
Meetup.com,
Netflix, all the entertainment.
Netflix is Netflix and Disney is on there.
Zoom
looks like Robinhood.
The hope is that there's a fallback, and this is what I was saying earlier: is that a lot of companies know that they're going to employ more than one cloud instance and node in their topology, and so the hope is that if you're using one of these services, it's still running. It's just failed over to a different node. That's all. It just so happens that US East 1 is like their Uber sort of node, and when that goes down, it's like, wow, okay, something bad has happened. And again, best wishes and hug ops out to the AWS team. I know they're going to get this right. I never find it. I always am sympathetic to teams that have to deal with these things. This is hard enough at the best of times, and when something like this happens, you're like, there are engineers working on the problem right now who are stressed out to the max because they realize, well, they know, and as you know, when you provide infrastructure of this kind, real businesses rely on this sort of thing to be up and up all the time, and so you've got to make sure that this stuff's is working. So I really hope they can get it right.
It's really tough when Tinder's down.
I know. Sure. I know
people are struggling out there. without their
Look, it's
Tinder.
easy. It's sure it's fun for us to make fun of all this stuff. Oh, it's down. Ah, how hilarious. Haha.
Yeah.
But I really, the first thought that's the okay, I'll be honest. That is the first thought that I have. Oh, it's interesting. Something went down. I'm not usually laughing, but because you look at things like Tinder being down, like, okay, great. But it is real. There are real businesses that rely on this. And so there are people all over the world, like throwing their hands up, like, I can't do anything. So yeah, it sucks when this happens. So
it's really surprising to see the difference in the outage behavior than what we saw last week, because the logos on this page were completely different last week.
Yeah.
And like you've got Nintendo down and McDonald's and Steam and, like you said, Netflix and Disney Plus, like a lot of entertainment on here, even though these are like competitive services. Prime Video, Netflix, and Disney, like, these are not all friends here.
No, they're not lightweights either. They consume quite a bit of traffic. But hopefully, they use fallbacks and all that. So
all right. on to less destructive news.
Yes.
John, you follow the GitHub blog pretty regularly. What's happening on the GitHub blog?
Well, it's just a blog post that they talk about how they utilize what are called ChatOps, and they utilize it in context of their chat bot, which is called Hubot. And it's basically a mechanism by things. In addition to that, they utilize other bots to perform commands. This is something that's pretty popular with a lot of folks. And the reason why I mention it here is because it is something for folks to think about, especially engineers. Developers should care too about this. This is something that you can consider implementing in your applications to support the folks who use your applications, in regards to using Slack or Teams, for example. So I thought it was just a nice way of kind of making it real world in the context of GitHub.
This is I'm not generally a fan of bots.
Yes.
But this looks like a good use for it.
Yes.
Yeah. It looks like we did pop offline for a minute.
Oh, that's fine. The nice thing about well, I'm looking at it right now, but I'm looking at the Twitch channel. We're streaming, so it's great. So the nice thing about utilizing bots and Slack and Teams in this context is that they're underpinned oftentimes by workflows. So Slack has an underlying workflow that you can use to control what you want to do based on certain actions or inputs. So you can set up a webhook that sends streaming events from your application to Slack, and you can route those to channels, or you can display certain dialogues, etc. Like you see here. It's like, hey, show me a help message. So it's kind of like, you can kind of think of it as like a CLI. So in a sense, you issue commands like, hey, tell me what I can do. And then it says, here's what you can do. And then you can have a dialogue that goes back and forth. And the reason why it's nice in this context is because there is a context here, which is a user, which is oftentimes what you want, but then you can factor in other users in your organization, because oftentimes you want to do things in concert with other folks. So you can actually have people included in on this collaboration that is an action to resolve a behavior. So let's say I want to reboot the server relative to AWS, US East 1, and then I have to bring in you, Ed, the sysadmin, to approve this, for example. You could be presented with a dialogue saying, hey, John wants to reboot the server. Is this cool? You say yes. And then that gives the authority to do that action. So that's just a fictitious example, but that's kind of where these can play out.
I like this. I like what you said about it being like a pseudo command line. I think where bots generally get a bad rap from me is when they're used with commercial services, like, you're trying to get through to a doctor, or you ordered something online and it's, something's wrong with the shipment. It came broken, and you see the little chat thing and you click on it, and it's like, you could tell it's a bot on the other side, and all you're wanting to do is get to a real person. And you're like, what do I have to tell this thing to get to the human that's actually going to solve my problem? It's like, oh, your internet's out. Have you tried turning it off and on again? It's like, please don't do this to me right now. But this is helpful. And it's this Hubot I'm trying to think where I've seen this before. I think we may have used it at Progress at one point.
Yeah, this has been used by a lot of folks because it basically provides you all the building blocks. It's a generic bot infrastructure, and it provides you all the building blocks of what you want to do. And you cook up recipes for it, and then it just does them for you, so you don't have to create one from scratch.
Okay.
Yeah,
I know I've seen it somewhere. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
Superb VS Code extensions changing your coding life.
Right. These are very popular, these types of articles, like, hey, top 10, top 30 React frameworks, top 40, Visual Studio extensions, top 50 Yeoman generators, whatever it is, right? So I didn't go through all these, but there's obvious ones that come around. I've seen VS Code extensions that will display the cricket match in the side, in a tree view, in a side menu, so that folks who want to watch their cricket and not leave VS Code, and maybe their boss comes around, they can watch in a small little window in the bottom of their VS Code extension. So yeah, there's lots of extensions out there. We've written one for Octopus Deploy. So yeah, VS Code extensions come in all shapes and sizes, and there may be one there for you. The great thing about the extension framework, especially in VS Code, is that they will recommend extensions for you when you load certain files. So it will sniff out certain file extensions and say, hey, it looks like you're modifying a .kendo file. Do you want to download the Kendo UI extension, for example? Totally fictitious, but you know what I mean. So lots of extensions worth checking out. If you're not using this, I would recommend you do. Extensions are sort of the secret sauce for VS Code, especially. And yeah, lots of extensions there to check out. And the VS Code marketplace is littered with tons of them.
I mean, there's some really good stuff here. Like I've got the pet extension. Have you seen the pet extension?
I have not.
Trying to remember how to open a pet.
So this is routing a command to something. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe I'm in the wrong thing here. Maybe I'll have to do it another time.
Well, while you're tab testing, the other thing,
tab.
Yeah, the other thing you can do with the extension, which is cool, is you can write these in such a way that they'll run inside a web context. So there's two real ways to write an extension. You can write one that runs within VS Code proper, that is basically utilizing Electron, etc. But you can write it in a way that uses Webpack, and then it will work in the context of code spaces or a web context where you're running the extension, like in github.dev, for example. So if you're an author or you're looking at utilizing these, you should definitely check those out. What is this?
Yeah,
pet panel.
Yeah, so we got our pets. So you can
throw a ball.
Your pet's a ball. It's just basically a game. it's just a game, and you're in like kind of inside of your
Perfect.
IDE.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a time waster basically. But, yeah. So there you can get a Clippy, and there's other pets that you can invite to your pet tab and let them play in a and they send you notifications too.
Sure. Yeah. These are all simple API calls. I know exactly what this is doing because we wrote one, and there's very, very simple API calls to make these. So anyways, aside from the pet one you saw Ed demo, there are many ones that will help your coding, so
or help you waste time.
Sure.
I mean, you download all of the ones you've got listed here, they save you time, and then you've got the one that wastes time, they break even.
Yes, my favorite was the cricket one, the one that will stream cricket matches through your VS Code extension. I thought that was pretty good.
Took a minute for me to comprehend what you're talking about when you said cricket. That's not a thing here.
No, it's baseball for the rest of the world. Okay, let's put it that way.
Like which pet extension is that? Is that there's the cat, now there's crickets too?
Right. Yes.
So this is a new post. This goes along with what you're talking about. It's a very short post though, because they're asking for feedback here. This is for Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. But they're trying to improve the extensibility for Visual Studio so we can get to a blog post like the one you just shared, where people are happily sharing extensions. Because the Visual Studio experience is kind of lackluster in this department. So please visit their dev blogs at Microsoft.com, and then it will link you to the survey where you can give them feedback on.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, so there's a lot that they can do here. Hopefully they take the feedback and run with that. That is brand new post from today.
My hot take on that is why not use Wasm as the host container for extensibility and then open it up to any language possible. I know that VSCode, VS, Sublime Text, and others all support what's called the Language Server Protocol, or LSP, which is the way in which you define the APIs to communicate between the client and the server, which provides the language services. So features like IntelliSense, what they do is they'll send these fragments to the language server protocol. This all runs within the context of your extension. And what you'll do is it's a protocol. It says, hey, send these things via client server within this process space. But what that does is you can then lift out that server implementation and then dump it into other IDEs. So you only have to write your language server protocol implementation once.
Which they're making use of that now.
Yes.
This is what the new Razor editor is built on.
Yes.
As far as the feedback that I left, I suggested they work on the customer interactions with this thing. There's not really a whole lot of support you get there. And then they ask you to leave feedback on their feedback portal, which is is just a dumping ground. And then there's a bot. We'll circle back to bots again. There's a bot that goes through after 30 days and like clears all the tickets. So it's like you're just throwing kindling on a fire for the bot to come put out. It's not very useful. No. So there's things that have been broken for years and don't get fixed. And I hope they do something about that.
You're better off not asking the question, to be honest. I think you piss people off when you start saying your feedback is important to us, and then you delete it, and then obviously that makes people more angry. You're better off just not asking in the first place. Like don't ask. I don't want to tell you.
When it's a bot that deletes it. It's like we didn't even bother doing this ourselves. We have a bot to come through and ignore your feedback for you.
Yes.
So that's been my experience with it. It's not a good one. Their snippet plugin system is completely broken, has been since like Visual Studio 2000 or 2017, something like that. And every time you issue a ticket, unless there's like a huge pile-on factor, which something like snippets isn't like a major blocker for folks, it's a nice have feature. But if it's not like I can't run unit tests or something massive, it doesn't get like a huge community like jump on there and upvote. So it just gets closed over and over again. And it's been like sitting there on the back shelf, like collecting dust and stinking to high heaven. Nobody does anything about it. So in rant, hopefully they'll take the feedback and do something positive with it.
Nice.
Enough said. So a little shameless plug here, John. A little Octopus 2021.
Yeah, we shipped a new version. Well, this is our massive update for Octopus Deploy customers. So this is our Q4 release for 2021, and it includes a ton of stuff. This is by far the biggest and most end-to-end release we've ever shipped. And if you're looking for a solution to help you deploy your software that is, supporting cloud and supporting a variety of scenarios, etc., and you're just looking to do it in a way that makes sense and does all the heavy lifting for you, maybe Octopus Deploy is right for you. Some of the highlights, we enabled a feature called Config as Code, which is basically it's akin to what you see with Terraform and HCL. We have this ability to describe your deployments in a plain text format, and that's massive because then you can take that file and commit it to source control. We've added Elastic Container Service support. We've added a new TypeScript client. We've got support for Config as Code, as I mentioned. We've got our new VSCode extension. So that was what I was mentioning earlier. Done a bunch of updates to our Terraform provider, Go client, etc. So lots and lots. It's totally end to end in terms of our release, and so lots of stuff to check out. And that's just something I wanted to mention.
Awesome, good stuff, John. This Things I Believe. This is the name of the blog, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. So that's
analyzing memory dumps using Visual Studio.
Yeah. So In my developer experience and in my history, which is long and sorted and varied, I've found that I've stumbled upon tools where I've been like, that looks really gnarly. I'm not going to look at that. I think the first tool I ever did that with was View, where back in the COM days, I would look at this and I'd be like, I don't know what this is doing, but it looks scary, so I'm going to avoid it. Later on, of course, I discovered that these tools are super valuable and I should be using them. View is one. Debug View is another. There's many in the sysinternals arsenal. So proc dump and the ability to view, these memory dumps, etc., are super, super valuable in the context of debugging. When things go wrong, so the analogy you can make is it's like entering a crime scene, right? So there's a body on the floor, or maybe there's a chalk line of a body on the floor, and you're the detective trying to figure out, okay, how did the killer escape out the front window, or how did this person die? Like there's a gunshot over here, and blah blah blah. WinDBG is a great example. So these and other tools allow you to be a detective when your app dies, and you're trying to kind of piece together what were the circumstances that led to this event. And so these are critical tools in your arsenal that you should know and should know how to use. And I know that a lot of these tools look scary when you first see them, and I get it. However, you'll thank yourself later when you learn to use these things. It's akin to using a brand new tool to do something in like woodworking or some other profession that you like. Once in a while, a tool comes along and you're like, I really should know this. And then you start using it. You're like, wow, I can't imagine life without this. And I would say that memory dumps and being able to trace them and being able to figure out what happened is exactly in that same space. IntelliTrace is an example of this in VSCode, VS, excuse me. IntelliTrace and IntelliCode, etc., are tools that help you do these not IntelliCode, but IntelliTrace allow you to do these things. And I've likened it to being like a detective at a crime scene. It kind of allows you to visualize, walk backwards in time, and say, okay, what happened? So this is a little article that talks about proc dump and other tooling within VS to help you analyze what happened at a memory level. And I know that for a lot of people, this will look scary. Hexadecimal, registers, memory. Like, yes, and it will help you. So learn it, try and use it.
This one before. The Windows application event logs.
Yes,
they're used for a lot of things, security audits, all that good stuff.
Yes.
But there was an app that I wrote, and it was for just a small set of users within my reach, my physical reach.
Yes.
And I used their application event log to log exceptions for me to go back if they had a problem with the app on their machine. I could just go back and look at their event log and see, was the server down? What was going on with the app at the time it threw an error, because how users are. They're like, the thing didn't work. It took a long time. And it's like, what's a long time? I don't know, 5 minutes. And then you go look at the logs and you're like, it was 37 seconds, not 5 minutes. But the server was down or something at the time for whatever reason.
So there's a lot of ways to tackle this problem. Event logs are one, memory dumps are another, process dumping, etc. All these things matter and they all help. There are other tools you can use. You can integrate what's called APM, or application performance monitoring, which allows you to do feature tracking, and you can capture exceptions and write them to an external service, etc. The reason why you want to use things like this is because oftentimes people are writing applications that have no UI whatsoever, like a backend service or a web server or whatever. There's no UI essentially to emit to. This is especially true with daemons or NT services, where there's really nothing to log. I have seen this, and this is always funny. This is another story. When people write services and they do they create a window and they're like, error exception, and it's like, no, it's a modal dialog, which means the service is hung. You have to wait for a user to click the OK button until the service can continue execution. That one's always fun. But the reason why you want to write to those external places is because oftentimes there's nowhere else to write to. So an external log, for example, is one. Dev asserts are another useful facility when debugging apps and processes. There's lots of tools out there, but knowing how to debug, I think, is fundamental to programming. People often focus on, okay, how do I create a class? How do I do inheritance? What is a property? How do I do generics, etc.? All that's well and good, but when things go south, and they often do, you really have to know how to debug. And debugging, I think, is
Yeah.
number one. You have to figure out what the heck did I do wrong.
Yeah, I worked on a site one time that had a custom login experience. I never would suggest anybody write their own security by any means. This wasn't custom security necessarily, but it used some custom forms around the login process.
Nice.
And it's a long story as to why we had to do it, but we had to. And the users of this site kept coming back with these complaints about not being able to log in all the time. And the person that was doing support on this was getting so upset. They were getting all these phone calls from these users that frankly should know better. But anyway, to make a long story short, to figure out what these people were actually doing, I started logging what they were inputting into these forms when they were logging in.
Right.
And you'd be surprised what people input into a username text box. Pretty much everything but their username.
Sure.
So
sure.
it's like,
why do I have to fill this
Yeah.
in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc.
Yeah. So it was like their email was like a big one. They'd always just jam their email in there, and it was like this is username based. It says username, not email.
Yeah.
It says username. So they put their email in there. There were reasons we couldn't use their email. It had to be username. So ended up putting a like long story short, like we analyzed all the data and ended up being like one of the biggest like mistakes people made was they put their email in this thing, or they put their first name and last name. It's like username, and they put first name and last name. It's like, how do I get these people to understand this is a username and nothing else? So I put a first name, last name, and email box on the page. They weren't required, nor did they actually store any data or transmit any data. They were just inputs for people to fill out.
Nice.
And that solved the problem. It solved the problem because that gave them enough context to go, okay, this other box is not my first name, last name, or email.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that was a fun one. All right. It's kind of about similar to what we were talking about. And I also wanted to point out, let me go back to that article we were talking about for one brief second. At the top of this, it says this post was part of the C# Advent 2021. We talked about this on previous shows.
Yes.
Every day there are 2 .NET related articles being posted to this page. If you don't know where to find this, I'll pop this one in chat real quick because it's a great index to a lot of good content coming your way. There'll be 50 articles here by the end of the month here. So that last article that we just talked about is part of this Advent calendar.
Nice.
This is also a part of the Advent calendar. And this is a blog post that I wrote. I talked a little bit about it last week that it was coming up. So I was doing some unit testing with Blazor components, trying to, looks like there may be some issues again with the live stream. So bear with us if there are any. I think it may just be affecting chat. Or maybe
take a look on the
I'll
take a look on the Twitch stream. We'll see if we're still streaming.
Yeah, I think chat may be down. But anyway.
All right.
I was doing some test-driven development with Blazor components already.
Yes.
And I'm always interested in being better at accessibility. So I figured, what if I take this TDD process and I add accessibility to it as one of the first requirements, rather than, just like
an afterthought.
Not only an afterthought, but it's like, yeah, I need to validate this HTML to know if my component works. But what if I'm looking for specific accessibility features as one of the first things that I need to fulfill? So I tried that process.
People often check ARIA attributes at like right before they deploy, and they're like, "Oh, I'm missing all of these."
Yeah, and one of the nice things about doing this with the TDD process is you're doing it in a very closed loop very early on in the process. You're not waiting for your end-to-end tests to run. You're not waiting for your system level tests to run. These aren't browser-based tests. you can do them very early and very quickly to make sure that you've checked the boxes that you need for building these components out. So talk a little bit about just setting up the testing framework and how you can do some simple validations. And then I talk about the component specs. So another thing that I found out very quickly is if you don't know how to spec out your components for accessibility, you probably should reach out to an expert to help you with it, because if you do this the wrong way, you're going to do more harm than good. So I found an example on the w3.org website that had a spec for an accordion component. And it has the full spec here with like each element that's on or attribute that's on each element. It had an HTML example of what it should look like. It also had keyboard support. So the keyboard support's fully spec'd out. And this is really important as well, because not all users use a mouse when they browse the web. Keyboard is very important to moving around your website and interacting with components. So you need to make sure that you adjust your components for that as well. So this is the overall item that gets built. So you get this accordion component. And this is using the Telerik REPL for Blazor.
Yes, nice.
Nice if it would work properly on stream.
Amazon, damn you.
Yeah. I don't know how we're hosting this, but something seems off. Something seems off today.
Maybe you could do let's do a live debugging session. Fire up your Chrome DevTools. Control-Shift-I. And then we'll do a network trace.
Let's not. Okay, there it goes. Looks like it recovered. All right. So, everybody knows what an accordion looks like, but this is what they spec out on the site. And this is kind of the implementation inside of Blazor. And then, we write some tests against that HTML, make sure it's rendering correctly. I just went and dumped the specs right into my test project and then started writing the tests out against it. So, you get into, you do a quick render, make sure you got the right stuff rendered, and then you start checking for the attributes. Is the ARIA expanded attributes there? And then we write a test to go in and see if it's existing on the right elements in there, and so on. Some other interesting things that came up with this are with keyboard navigation. So we're not working with an actual browser. We're working with just a rendering of those components. So there's some things that you can test for and some things that you can't. One of the things you can't do is say, does this element have focus? Because it's not in a browser context, so it doesn't really know if it's focused or not. But there were mocks that are included with the test framework to you could not tell if something already had focus, but if you needed to set focus to something, like with keyboard commands, for example. So when you're pressing the key up and down commands, you want to check and see if those items are getting focus or not. So what you can do is say, was that focus method invoked? And did it have the right element reference with that argument? So you'd say,
using, WebDriver under.
It's using
WebDriver under the covers.
It is using something called
Selenium,
AngleSharp.
blah blah blah. Okay,
No. See, so Selenium, Test Studio, all those things actually use a browser to do their testing, and this gets you an inner loop that's much shorter because it's just a unit test. So you're only rendering the actual component you're developing instead of the entire page and the entire application spinning up when you want to do these tests. So the tests fire off very quickly. They're like sub-millisecond. You fire it up and it's like, was this ARIA attribute rendered, yes or no? It's instantaneously solving those tests and validating them. So this one, it'll render the component out and hit a keyboard key, and then it's going to check and see if the method to give focus to another element was called, and did it have the right reference to the correct element. So in the case of the accordion, if you're on if you're on the panel 1, you press the down arrow, it should move to panel 2's title. So you can check for those things. So there's a lot of little gotchas and things in here that I found. along the way in regards to like things I didn't know about accessibility, to things I didn't know about testing components that were really really helpful in working on whatever I do next. I'll know those things ahead of time. So it's a pretty good read, in my
Nice.
opinion. I wrote it, but my biased opinion is go check it out.
Cool.
All right. And that one's at telerik.com/blogs, by the way. Benchmarking F# 6 tasks.
Yeah,
Something
I'm
that you
sensitive.
posted here,
I'm
John.
sensitive to the fact that not everyone's going to be doing F#. So let me put that out there. F# is a great functional language based on .NET, and F# 6 is now part of that family of languages updates that have occurred with .NET 6. And so this was a blog post that kind of went over the performance telemetry that was observed with F# 6, .NET 6 versus .NET 6, F# 5, .NET 5, F# 5, etc. And so there was a bunch of questions that were asked as part of the benchmark. How much faster is it versus other versions? Do tasks run more performantly? Are they different via task or async libraries, etc., etc.? So there was lots of stuff mentioned, and the results are pretty good. I mean, like you're seeing a definite improvement relative to previous versions of F# and .NET. And so, it's already quite performant. It's actually doing really, really well. And so, this is just yet another, thumbs up for .NET 6 and F# relative to performance. And the summary at the bottom lists all the highlights, basically. Anything that's CPU bound is about 4% faster. .NET 6 provides a 15% performance boost for tasks over .NET 5. There's some regression that's occurred with async, but generally speaking, it's actually pretty good.
Very cool. Scan of the month.
Yes.
Like your jam of the month club.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, my father's a radiologist, so I see these all the time. What these are CT scans of products, and they've decided to CT scan the AirPods over time. So the original AirPod, then as you scroll down, you see the evolution of AirPods, and they show you. I thought it was a nice experience, but I have AirPods. I have them right here. I know that other people have AirPods and they like them, and this is basically a CT scan into the sort of inner workings of these things, kind of looking at where things reside, how they are formulated. If you're a hardware wonk or a hardware person, you're going to find this very interesting. Obviously, compressing.
I love
and
the
putting all
animations
these,
here.
I know. This is what CT scans give you, right? You can actually do these really kind of interesting things. This is what people see when they go in and get internal imaging done for things like cancer and other things like that. You'll see dyes pick this up, but with this, it's because it's electronic and it actually can interact with the particles that are emitted. You can actually start getting some really interesting views into what is underneath the plastic, so to speak. So I thought this was kind of cool. In case you're interested,
Yeah,
a lot of amazing
I love the way this is
miniaturization and technology. Yeah,
animated out here. This is all built
yes,
with some kind of canvas.
yep,
It's really neat.
yeah.
I love it.
So there you go.
Good stuff.
Yeah, pretty amazing. They're able to compress everything down into that.
Yeah. What's new with gRPC for .NET 6, John?
Lots and lots. So obviously, James, who's been working obviously on JSON.NET for a long time, he's part of Microsoft now. He's the principal software engineer, I believe, on the .NET team. James is very familiar with gRPC since he's been working on it for a while, and so he's been basically articulating in this blog post what's new relative to gRPC and .NET 6. gRPC is really, really nice if you're looking for a very high performant RPC-based framework. So this is a little bit different than what you might do with, say, a REST-based protocol, etc. This is very much RPC-ish. This is very much like get this, do this, execute that via RPC. And so it's at a very low level, but it's used in a lot of applications. It's web-friendly, works really, really well, allows you to describe your types using protocol buffers, etc. And so they're talking about the implementation in .NET 6 and how it actually works and works well. in that context. And so they talk about client-side load balancing. They talk about transient fault handling. They talk about protocol buff performance. So protocol buffers is the way in which you describe basically your types that get emitted on the wire. It's the binary protocol for it. And the ability to serialize and deserialize this stuff is pretty important because that's ultimately what you're sending across the wire. And so they talk about that. They talk about download speeds. And then they round things out by talking about HTTP3, which is something that's in .NET 6. And so lots of good stuff coming. If you're looking for a fast transport protocol that's web friendly, that works well, that allows you to describe your types in a very meaningful way, gRPC and protocol buffers are a way to go. And if you're using .NET, then this is what's new in .NET 6.
Nice. Yeah, if you're looking at something like this, I would suggest reading up on the differences between REST and SignalR and gRPC.
Yes.
SignalR and gRPC are a little closer to one another than REST would be. But it's nice to know the different ways which these things work, because it's going to impact, like we talk about here, load balancing and things in your application. So this is really cool stuff, though. I want to get into some more gRPC.
Sure.
I just haven't found the use case for me to explore this more yet. But we've done some simple demos with like the Telerik data grid and stuff, and lit that up with data using Blazor and gRPC. It's really easy to do.
It is. The nice thing with gRPC is that so JSON can be a bit heavy. String serialization, you can compress it a little bit with transport protocols, etc. Compression protocols are there, but it's a bit beefy compared to protocol buffers. And plus sometimes you have to, it's a document oriented approach to doing services, right? So sometimes that's not what you want. And so there are going to be good reasons and valid reasons for using alternatives. And so this might be one of them. So yeah, definitely worth checking out.
I believe the transport is binary on this as well.
Yes.
So I think the data goes binary through gRPC.
It is a binary protocol format, yes. So that's another difference. And so obviously the packet sizes are smaller, etc. And it turns out when you do this,
security could be better as well.
Well, obfuscation a little bit. Yeah, sure. You can secure that through a secure transport. I mean, that's not really a big issue for me, but I look at this as what's the fastest possible way to do this? And also, what is a way that I can do this that is more meaningfully to me? Wow, that took a while to get out. Wow. As a developer, relative to the way in which I describe the client server interaction, right? If I do this via REST protocol or a REST sort of service level protocol, I'm doing it basically, I can do it in two ways. I can describe it using these documents and then use HTTP verbs to describe them, but sometimes that doesn't work out, right? What is the if I'm doing an event notification or something like that, or I'm wanting to do a simple RPC request, using a HTTP verb may not make sense, right? How do I do that in that context? And so gRPC and RPC in general gives me a better means of expressing that.
Excellent. I've highlighted this a few times on the show. It's been a little while since we gave it a mention. Sam's been he's up to issue 36 now. Sands of Maui, he's giving kind of an update on Maui from both a Microsoft and a community aspect here. Sharing some apps that were built with it, like this new .NET podcast app that somebody open sourced.
Yep.
What's been happening on the community stand-up, how to customize Maui controls. This is a bit that Sam and I talked about. This is something that he was working on. He talked to somebody at a conference that was interested in rendering a Angular application within a Blazor hybrid, or not Blazor hybrid, a Maui web view.
Okay.
Similar to the way that Blazor works. It doesn't quite come with all the features and implementations that Blazor does, but essentially the web view just renders anything that's HTML, CSS, static assets format. So you can easily render an Angular or React app within a web view within a Maui application. So it's essentially a PWA that's hosted within a Maui app. Instead of having like a Chrome shell on it, you've got a .NET shell on it.
Right.
You can use some IPC channel or JavaScript interop framework like the JavaScript SPA services from .NET
Yep.
to talk to this
Yes.
application theoretically. So you could run native APIs on the device and have them talk to your web application that's hosted within this shell. That's very experimental stuff, but Sam was tinkering around with that. It's a pretty cool idea. And then, last but not least here, he's got the .NET Maui Community Toolkit, which I think is a collection of different tools, whether they're extensions, etc., that you can use with Maui, which is going to release sometime early next year. So it's always a good summary here on Sam's blog post with the sands of Maui.
I'm disappointed, Sam, and I'll tell you why. He doesn't make an Arrakis reference. He's got Dune that's eating the world right now in terms of attention and movie going, and he doesn't make a single reference to Paul Atreides or Arrakis or the Harkonnen or the worms or any of that, the spice. I would easily tie that in. Come on, Sam.
Yeah, Sam, if you've ever talked to Sam, I know you're good friends with Sam, but he's not the pop culture reference guy.
This is nerd culture, not pop culture. It's become popular because Jason Momoa and famous people are in the new movie. But look, us nerds read Dune back in the 80s. At least I did. And we claim ownership of that, So
I mean, you're talking about somebody who almost got us thrown out of Seattle. We were in Seattle together, and there was a Nirvana cover band playing. And I don't remember the song it was playing, but it was one of the more popular cuts. And I turned to Sam and I said, "Hey, these guys, I've heard a lot of Nirvana cover, or I've heard a lot of these cover bands.
Sure.
And this one's actually pretty good." And he said, "I've never heard this band before."
Wow.
I was like, "Dude, we're in Seattle. You're gonna get us hurt.
Yeah.
Like this is not something that you
not good
take lightly here."
I've heard of this. Hey, have you heard of this new band called Pearl Jam? They're great. Sam, come on, man.
Poor Sam. He's not here to defend himself.
I know. We should stop. Yes.
This is pretty cool. This was highlighted on CSS Tricks, but I wanted to share the direct website that they talked about on CSS Tricks. So while I was browsing CSS Tricks, they had an article about this website, and it's called Open Props. So you can think of things like Bootstrap and Tailwind or like fully baked frameworks for the web. This is more of a style guide more than anything. So it's like if you want to create a repeatable pattern for styling a website and using intelligent property names for your variables, here's some places to get started. So it's just like it says here, design consistency. So you could pop in here and say, where's the, like for fonts, for example, gives you an example of what to name your font properties and gives you some defaults. So you could just easily copy paste this into the project that you're working on, and now you have a foundation to build off of for naming your fonts and setting the properties for those things. You could do that with colors. That's another good one. So you generally see things like primary, secondary, that type of stuff. This sets you up a good palette that you can customize for your app. And there's just basic little starting blocks here for you to work with to just getting your variables set up for your CSS on your HTML pages. So they've got more things planned, obviously, but there's a lot of really helpful stuff in here, especially when you think of stuff like animations. Like this is something that I always forget how to write these, and this gives you a nice, again, palette to work from. So there's some examples in here of how these work.
I like it.
So you basically have shadows is another really good one. So you have like some starters for shadows. But this isn't like a full-on UI framework by any means.
No, it's just a mapping mechanism.
So what's nice about this is if you implement these property names on your website or your web app, and say it's adopted by Tailwind or it's adopted by Bootstrap or maybe even both, that would be phenomenal. You could just interchange settings between different sites and they would just essentially work.
You're leading towards the question I wanted to ask you. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I want to know if you know, do they provide mappings for all the popular frameworks out there? What I mean to say is, if I use, say, their property called Ease In, will that map? Because I know that certain frameworks do the same thing. They provide their own mappings for these sorts of things. Would they provide a mapping file? Or if they don't, maybe they should. Do they provide a mapping file to all the other popular frameworks so that you only need to know one and only one name for that thing?
I don't think they do. I know we do that for Kendo UI.
Yes,
in Bootstrap.
but you know what I'm saying, right? You like, because a lot of frameworks define these things. Okay,
yeah, we do that with Kendo UI and Bootstrap. So if you change a Kendo UI color, it maps over to Bootstrap and changes its color as well. I don't think they do that here, at least not yet.
But it would be cool if they did, because then it's like, look, just call it this, and across any other framework, it will always be this thing. Now, I know that they're thunking down to the sort of browser level implementation of that, which is fine. That's fair. Would be kind of neat if they also did sort of fallbacks as well. I think they would probably do that as well, because I know that different browsers express some of these things differently. Like animations is one example. Like, there's different, fallbacks you'd have to implement, but
yeah, there's not so much difference anymore in a lot of those things.
Yeah, I know.
You could run it through a post processor.
Yes.
I think a post processor would work probably really good for that, because it can pick up all of this after the fact and then apply any of those changes that you need. Which makes it you don't have to keep writing those things, and then when they go out of style, you don't have to go back in and take them out manually.
I know.
So you could post process some of that stuff. Yeah, bounce, blink.
Yeah,
gotta have the blink animation.
That's so 1997. Where's the under construction CSS one?
Yeah, I like this idea. It gives you a good common place to communicate with other developers for HTML. And we've got Chris Demars, Salt and Burnham here in the chat. I think he's celebrating here. It's better than Tailwind. Is that that's like, I don't know if that's an overwhelming yes, or if it's just like, it's better than Tailwind.
Look, I think everyone's going to have their opinions, especially when it comes to web frameworks and such. I have certainly fought my battles in CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think, if it works and it works well, then go for it.
Yeah. What I like here is you're only setting up the actual property and the property value for it. You still use CSS, you're still going to define a box shadow. You're just applying the properties that have been kind of predefined for you with the file. So you can, if you want to change those shadows, you can easily just go in and set the variables however you'd like, but at least they're named the same consistently throughout all your projects now. So I think this is really cool. This open props thing is really nice. It's more of a language style guide than it is anything else. It's not a framework. It's not a library. It's a language style guide. I like it. Very cool stuff. I know you're excited, John. It is the Snapchat AR Lens Fest this week.
Yay.
We don't have crickets, but I can hear birds.
Yay.
So this is a conference about augmented reality, and it's a 3-day event with workshops, and they're talking about this new Snapchat AR ecosystem. And they're talking about their new glasses with this as well. A lot of their stuff right now is done with scanning and the camera on your phone, but they do have their spectacles, which we talked about on the show before. These lovely devices. which we'll talk about a little bit more here. But
God help us.
you know, you've heard me say it before. This is the next big thing. AR is the next big thing. When it finally catches fire, it will be on everybody's face. So it might be worth paying attention to, even if Lens Fest might not be the first thing that comes to mind today. It should be something that you put on your radar and pay attention to.
About no.
So about no. 3 days. 3 days of content, John. You're going to say no to 3 days of content?
Yes, I'll say hard no to 3 days of
Connected
whatever
Lenses
content.
Workshop. So AR fashion. Very, very nice stuff here. I mean, come
hard
on.
no.
So talking about the AR Snap spectacles, The Verge has been involved with the what's it called? The conference here. On fire, on my face, no thanks. We're getting to that, Fuel Snabble. We're getting to that.
Why are we doing this?
This is actually something we need to talk about.
This is so dumb.
So, this is the hot take. We're staying with the fire and on your face theme. This is their Verge's hot take on the first AR spectacles. Ambitious and impractical to start. Everything like this is, though. So they took them for a spin. You got to love the opening paragraph here that talks about the first pair I was handed in a recent demo overheated. After about 10 minutes. So you weren't too far off there with the comment of catching fire on your face. And it also says that the display was so small, I wouldn't want to look through it for a longer period of time. So 10 minutes is pretty stressful on your eyes, apparently. That's not a great place to start, but you know, you got to start somewhere. And it's an interesting looking device. It's a lot smaller than the HoloLens. It's
not
self-contained.
interesting looking. It's not interesting.
It does look very odd. He compares it to a Cybertruck on your face.
Yes. I'm not going to wear those.
That's cool. That's a cool guy. Come on.
No, he's not. No, I don't want to be.
You got to have the obligatory.
I'm not going to do this. I am not.
Spider-Man
I am not going to do this.
Meme post.
I am not going to do this.
No one
will
do
this.
Spider-Man meme.
No one will do this. No one will do this. I'm sorry. No one will do this.
And of course, this is the experience that you get right here. So you can have a zombie chase you through your lovely backyard with pool deck.
You'll run into things. Perfect.
You can play fetch with an AR dog. Because why not?
We have far better problems to solve right now. I'm going to be such a curmudgeon right now. We have far better problems to solve than this.
Hey, you can look at the solar system in broad daylight.
There's dolphins washing up on the beach because there's no fish left, and we're worried about throwing a virtual dog a virtual bone.
I would play a clip from Debbie Downer from SNL, but we'd probably get pulled off of YouTube for it, John. But you know the skit.
Is not.
Sure.
This
womp,
is
womp.
No, look.
Good old John, bring it down a notch.
Sorry, I'm not going to wear these. I will not wear these. I will not buy these. I have negative interest in these. This turns me off so much.
Right there.
I wear these. These are hard enough to wear, and they're super lightweight. I don't want to wear them. I don't want to wear these.
This is the first generation of these.
I don't care if they're the 8th generation or the 80th generation. They're not going. This is
that's what I'm saying.
This is so far off in the future.
Somebody probably brought John, somebody like John in the very long ago past, a pair of very heavy pieces of glass welded to some put inside of some kind of stick frame.
You'll be fine. Yeah, I know. Just
put it on your face. You'll be able to see things. You know, yeah. So true story. We'll have a little quick history lesson before we wrap here, John. Do you know why the original spectacles were not big sellers? It's true story. I'm not joking.
Fine, I'll bite.
The fact. People couldn't read. It's useless as hell. It's true.
All right.
People couldn't read. There wasn't a big market for them, so they didn't sell.
Well, they need to see, right? I need to see where the cow has gone, right?
Yeah, but
if I take these off, it's a bit fuzzy. So
it's a bit fuzzy, but it's you can still tell there's a cow there. the real audience for glasses came when people got more literate.
All right.
So yeah, look that one up. I learned about it online, so it has to be true.
I won't. I don't care. No one will wear these. That's my take. Sorry.
So you're worried about dolphins washing up on the beach. You put the AR glasses on and have it filter that out. You just don't see it anymore.
We have far bigger problems to worry about.
You put the glasses on, the water looks clean now.
All right. Yeah. All right. Whatever. All right. Great show, everyone.
Right. I chased John off.
Sorry. I apologize. Look, I'm sorry. I just feel like there are really, really big problems right now. And
the dolphin's dead, but you can animate happy faces on it.
Look, I don't think augmenting my current reality is going to help anything. I think all I need is let's focus on real problems, please. Thank you. That's all I'll say. Sorry.
One thing I actually would love to see with this AR stuff is history lessons taught through augmented reality would be amazing.
Yeah, learning anything that's educational, sure.
So to be able to go to a place like, let's say, Pearl Harbor or something, and put on a pair of AR glasses and see the warships that were parked in the harbor at scale would be a phenomenal experience, I think.
Okay.
Something like that would be absolutely bonkers. I think that type of stuff would be really cool. I've seen museums trying to do things with this. I think having this accessible outside of a museum would be a much bigger thrill than doing it inside of a museum. So to be able to put on a pair of glasses and walk down a street and see buildings that used to be there historically, maybe this was a saloon back in its heyday, etc. Or as Aztec says, like see the Egyptian sites, like in
you're right.
Past context would be.
I stand corrected. I stand corrected. That is a good application. I stand.
So corrected. Before you get there, you have to throw a bone to an AR dog at some point. This is the hello world moment of this type of technology.
Yes. Look, maybe I'm not. Look, I'm stupid. Maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture here. I'll admit. Okay. I just feel
I'm sure. Like, if John was shown the first computer, he'd be like, "Why do I have to say hello world? That makes no sense. Like, I'm not doing this."
All right, fair enough. I'll take humble pie. Thank you. All right,
John. Take care, my friend. I'll see you next week. And thanks everyone in chat for following along as long as you have. You're still there. I'm amazed. But we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, y'all.